Hey, welcome to a special episode of If These Woods Could Talk, produced by the Rhinelander District Library. This is the first of a six-part series in which we'll be digging into a story from the Rhinelander area that's been pretty thoroughly lost to time. Over the next several weeks, I'll be telling the story with help from friends around town. Happy today to be joined by three recognizable figures as we talk about the background of this Donnerstag family. You'll know her from Ullman and Barry on North Brown Street, from the historical cemetery tours the last couple years, or from your last house fire. It's Anita Tyler. Good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. And from WJFW, we've got Dan Hagen and Lily Alstein.
Excited to be here, man.
So excited. Thanks for having us.
I'm glad you're here. So this will be fun. Let's jump in. If these woods could talk, they might tell you about the 1880s influx of European immigrants who hacked and sawed their way ever northward and created the Wisconsin we know today. This is the Donnerstag family of Woodboro, Chapter 1. The Staga begins. In September of 2022, I fielded a phone call from someone in Fond du Lac requesting 4 microfilmed articles from 1904. I typically handle the historical reference questions, so I went searching through our archive of the New North. What I found was the headline, Suicide at Manson. The article read,
Word has reached here of the suicide of Thomas Donnerstag, a homesteader residing near Manson, by shooting himself through the head this morning. He was not unknown in Rhinelander.
They didn't mince words. Pretty morbid stuff. However, the next requested article, published a week later, showed that the first article had been poorly informed. We'll get to that. But I was hooked. I found the articles and emailed them as requested, but this story stuck with me. I went to the Historical Society and asked Bill Vankus if he'd ever heard the name Donnerstag. Nobody there had. I tried the Pioneer Park Historical Complex, same answer. So for the next year, the story stuck with me. I began to do some cursory research into the family, and it just kept going. A year and a half after the initial contact, I decided to risk being weird. I reached back out to that person in Fond du Lac and asked if they'd mind if we did a story on it for the library's podcast. Apparently, the request came to us from Canada via a friend in Wisconsin. The friend put me in contact with Brenda from British Columbia. She replied immediately and effusively.
I am Brenda Ludwig. I've been the genealogist in our family, and my ancestors were Schultz and Ludwig. They came to Wisconsin in the early 1880s, and through my genealogy research, I came across the Donnerstag family. When I was researching my family history, one of the ancestors was the Schultz family. They came from a small town about an hour and a half east of Krakow, Poland, a German community, and so did the Ludwigs. And my great-grandmother, Magdalena Schultz, married John Ludwig. So that's how I came into the Schultz and Ludwig family. Magdalena's younger brother, Fred, married Hannah Donnerstag.
Brenda came across this story decades ago doing her own genealogical research. Her family tree branched into the Donnerstags 3 or 4 generations back, and she's been telling people this wild story ever since the 90s. Before long, she mailed me a box of information she'd collected related to the family. We kept in contact, sharing updates and new finds, and soon she organized everything by time period. She printed hundreds of pages and had them spiral bound in 4 volumes and sent me my own copies of these workbooks. We found another interested party just seeing usernames on Ancestry and newspapers.com. Another direct descendant of the Donnerstags named Scott.
My name is Scott Carlson, and I'm the grandson of Rudolph Donnerstag, of the Donnerstag family that lived in Rhinelander, in Rhinelander, and before that in Manson Lake area. And Louis Donnerstag was my grandfather, who was the son of Rudolph.
We all synthesized our knowledge, and it's pretty exciting. So I guess that's the background of why this story matters to me. It's been kind of a long time coming.
Well, it seems like there's a lot of interest from people who are descendants of them, which means they were memorable and had some crazy tales. I mean, already the newspaper was wrong in their original publication of Thomas's death.
There is no Thomas.
What?
And that's not the only thing ill-informed in that article, short as it is. So,
Darn journalists always messing up.
so yeah, that's 3 years ago. I continue to dig into Ancestry and newspapers.com, just trying to fill in gaps. But I found I really have no more excuse for not just getting it over with, and everyone I know is kind of sick of hearing about it, I think. So I'll cite my sources in the notes of these recordings. Where possible, I will share relevant images. I'll do my best to stick to verifiable fact, even when I really believe something off the books to be true, and where I speculate, I'll tell you so. So let's begin with the facts. We're going back to Germany. Story begins in German Bohemia, where Louis Donnerstag and Johanna Springfelt were born and raised. Rudolph, whose middle name was Louis, and he would go by Louis for most of his life. Rudolph Louis Donnerstag was born in German Bohemia in 1847. Family lore says that he fought in a war and earned an Iron Cross for bravery, though we have no evidence of what war he fought in. Though it must have been either the Austro-Prussian War in 1866 or the Franco-Prussian War from 1870 to 71. Lily, do you want to fill people in on those wars and what happened in those conflicts?
I really wish I could. I don't know that much.
I thought your
about it.
dissertation was on the Franco-Prussian War.
I have a bachelor's degree,
Correct.
so thanks for that. Yeah, I wish I knew more, but this does sound very interesting.
I also wish I knew more about these wars. I do not. So we'll just skip that. But there was a war.
Yeah.
There's no evidence of which, nor is there evidence of a medal. Maybe. Joanna was born in the same area as Louis 3 years later in 1850, and there's not much else to be found about her. I'm also not exactly a seasoned genealogist, but not a lot to be found. We know that they were married in 1874, and in 1875 they welcomed their first child, a boy named Rudolph. 5 years later, in 1880, Louis left Germany and came to the United States. He left behind a young son and a pregnant wife. Embarking from London aboard the SS Australia, he landed in New York on November 15, 1880. He's listed in the ship's manifest as Donnerstag Rudolph, a 33-year-old farmer. About 11 months later, Joanna followed him. She took the Habsburg from Bremen, Germany to New York. The manifest shows Donnerstag Joanna, 30-year-old unemployed female with 2 children, Rudolph 5 and Anna 7 months. So, slight departure here. This is just a cool thing I learned, and good enough chance you're aware of this. When we think of immigration into New York City, I think we all kind of have the same sepia-toned image in our minds, right? For me, it's Fievel, An American Tale. A harbor filled with great ships waiting to disembark, crowded, chaotic docks, people carrying their barest necessities like raggedy sardines in endless customs lines. The name Ellis Island from textbooks floats high and grand above it all, as if embossed in gold. Ellis Island is practically a metonym for East Coast immigration, but that immigration processing station didn't open until 1892. Does anyone know prior to that where they came through?
No clue.
I did not either. I just assumed it was always there. There's a different seaside port, honestly, not too far from Ellis Island. It was formerly a military fort. Castle Clinton, used in the War of 1812, was repurposed for immigration and customs and became known as Castle Garden. I spoke with Ranger Eric from the National Park Service at Castle Clinton National Monument about the experience of coming through Castle Garden.
Ranger Eric. I work at Castle Clinton National Monument here in New York City. If you're not aware, Castle Clinton, it's an old historic fort. It's located right at the tip of Manhattan Island. And we have this beautiful view of the harbor and of the Statue of Liberty right off of it. Castle Clinton is the original name of the building, dating back to around 1815. The name was changed to Castle Garden when it was converted into an entertainment center in 1824. The new name would stick around with the conversion into the Immigration Depot and is what the people of the 19th century used when talking about the building. The full name of the depot was Castle Garden Emigrant Depot. Castle Garden received immigrants between August 3rd, 1855 and April 18th, 1890. There were about 8 million immigrants in all that were processed during that time.
Can you describe the scene there on a typical day?
Sure thing. In short, the building was referred to as a crowded, loud, and smelly place. There were hundreds of immigrants from around Europe being processed at the facility daily and often at the same time. Immigrants from various cultures would often ride together, so those being processed would have spoken a variety of languages and had a vast array of cultural clothing and norms on display. For many immigrants, it would have been difficult to understand the foreign languages and customs they were encountering all at once. The Yiddish community, for example, even came up with a word describing their experience immigrating through the facility. They have a term called Kessel Garden, which refers to a chaotic, confusing, and loud place, which they still use today. Immigrants often didn't have opportunities to bathe on the 5 to 7 week trip over from Europe, and so employees probably opened the windows of the building to keep fresh air flowing in and out. And you can still see that, funny enough, in photographs that survive. Most immigrants, in fact, all that go through Castle Garden, would have been steerage class passengers. So that's your third class. They're the ones on the bottom of the boat. They're usually packed in together. Now, your first or your second class, they are going to be processed directly on board the boat soon after its arrival into New York. And they are allowed to skip the immigrant depot. They're let off at whatever dock is available. Most immigrants would have spent a few hours at the facility before moving on to their final destination. It was a good spot to sort of rest in between moving on to where else they were going in the city or in the country. They had options in the facility regarding food. They could purchase from a restaurant or snack bars. They could exchange money. They could send and receive mail, as well as gather more information about the city and the United States. I am unaware of there being any concerns of danger inside the facility. In fact, there were police officers who worked at the facility that acted as security. Imagine it would have been pretty safe, inside anyway. Well, I don't think a poor German woman would have had a different experience from anyone else in the facility, but immigrating as a single woman in those days would certainly have come with a lot of risk. Safety was always a concern on the boat ride over. And after arrival, she would have been directed to a registration desk where she could report any issues that might have come up on her journey. The Commission of Immigration, which was a state-run agency here in New York, ran the facility, and they took complaints very seriously. Many of the commissioners were former immigrants themselves, and they had, of course, all sorts of experiences on the boat ride over. And so they usually investigated incidents and tried to make amends for any problems or wrongs that had happened on the journey.
That's coming over through Castle Garden from Europe, kind of dismal.
Yeah, for sure. All I'm picturing is like when he's saying like third, first, second class, I'm like picturing Titanic. That's all I can see. And that's super interesting how that was worked out.
I can't imagine being a woman with a 5-year-old and a newborn on a ship for weeks. How long does it take to
2
get
months,
over?
almost 2 months.
5 to 7 weeks is what he said, coming from
gosh.
Europe on a ship. And they're packed in, they've got like cots and not much personal space in them.
Wow.
So even the stinky ruckus of Castle Garden probably was a welcome experience after
Solid ground, at
2
least.
months of that. Yeah.
Wondering how, like, babies wear diapers or
Right.
nappies or whatever. Like, what was she doing for the child, for the baby? And I have so many questions.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
We'll join the club. I mean, yeah, I mean, that is probably the case with any historical research, but it's just unanswered questions that are going to drive me nuts forever. And that's
Did
one
they-
of them.
Did they have a mess hall? What did they do for food?
Yeah.
Was it provided with the ticket?
Sounds like they had options to purchase snacks.
Oh,
So
wow.
I think it's a whole nother podcast.
You're right.
That's what I'm
yeah.
You know, I'm curious, how bad was it in Germany? Like,
This-
to risk everything for
Right.
this.
And that's a question I didn't even address.
I
That's
think the promise of land ownership, I think, is probably
Yeah.
it really is the thing in the Homestead Act,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Very interesting.
I also asked Ranger Eric if he could tell me anything about how the Donnerstags may have reached Wisconsin.
It's difficult for me to say, truthfully, without knowing the specifics of the railroad schedules. You could certainly purchase food on board the railroad trains. But as far as what the costs would be or anything like that, that's probably not a answer that I can provide.
Okay.
The 19th century is a rapidly changing time, and things that travel options in the 1850s are different than those in the 1890s. So for traveling out towards Wisconsin, immigrants could take either a ferry up the Hudson and across the Erie Canal to the Great Lakes, or they could take a train once tracks had been laid down. If traveling out west by train, immigrants would have taken a ferry across the Hudson once they had been processed at the facility to New Jersey, a place called Liberty State Park. Within that park, there was a train station, which is still there today, though it was built in the 20th century, the current building, where immigrants traveling west would have gotten on the train.
I tried contacting, like, Grand Central Station to see if this. Of course, there aren't records of tickets or even reliably prices of stuff from 150 years ago. So I really don't know anything about costs. But yeah, it sounds like a couple months of mostly like bags of Ritz crackers for
Sure.
meals. And,
Well, and imagine being on a boat for 7 weeks just to get on another boat to cross this river and then Lake Michigan. Like, that sounds like a nightmare.
it does sound like a nightmare. And I also don't know if Louis went to New York to meet the family or if he waited for them in Wisconsin. He must have written letters or something to say, come to. Yeah, chances are he must have known Joanna was pregnant before he left Germany. But today we have a show called I Didn't Know I Was Pregnant. So, no, they probably knew. So I don't know how they arranged their reunion.
I'm sure it was letters, though. Letters across the ocean.
Across the ocean. Took a long time. And yeah, so it was about 11 months later she took the journey, and however it happened, you have to imagine there was an emotional reunion, even for 19th century Germans. Louis was likely separated from Joanna and Rudolph for more than a year, and he'd never even met his 7-month-old daughter. So that gets us to near the end of 1881, and after that, records of the family are pretty few and far between for a decade. They seem to move around Marathon County, which I know has a big German background. But talking to the Historical Society there, nobody was able to find the name Donnerstag. So at least they weren't apparently doing anything notable or evil. So, but yeah, not much to be found there. What we do know comes from birth records pretty much. I think it bears mentioning that Joanna and Louis are supposed to have had two children in between Rudolph and Joanna who were stillborn or died in infancy. That was just incredibly common. Beyond that, this is what we know. On December 7th, 1882, a boy named Hugo was born in Wausau. On January 8th, 1885, they had a girl named Clara in Easton. On January 11th, 1887, they had a girl named Emma in Wausau. Then Albert was born June 20th, 1889 in Wausau. And the last one, Anna, was born January 23rd, 1891 in Schofield.
So do we have two Annas here?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Hannah. Yeah, I imagine like yelling, Hannah, clean your room, and both of them come, or what,
Right.
Yeah. Hannah, Emma, Anna.
Got
And
it.
of course, mother is Joanna, and there really were only like 6 names back then,
I don't
right?
think that's
Is that not true?
I think there were more than that. But probably family names.
Yeah, I think so. According to later records, they were living in Tomahawk by 1892, and that is where the Donnerstag story really begins. The family moved into a rented house on Somo Avenue in downtown Tomahawk between 6th and 7th Streets. Directly across Somo from them lived a man named Sherman Merritt. Merritt was an engineer for the railroad, which made him something of a big wheel in fledgling Tomahawk society. He didn't like the look of his new neighbors. After a couple of unpleasant encounters and a few short years, an explosive chance meeting one night would change everyone's lives forever. In the next episode of the Donnerstag family of Woodboro.
Dun dun dun.
Thunder. So thanks all for being here. Thanks again to Ranger Eric and the National Park Service as well. We'll talk more with Dan, Lily, and Anita in Chapter 2. This has been If These Woods Could Talk, a production of the Rhinelander District Library. Follow us on Facebook for more Northwoods history, as well as on Instagram, YouTube, and most podcast platforms.